Good afternoon, good morning. It's Big Cheds. I'm coming to you with another chapter of My Battles with Cancer, a candid patient and caregiver's memoir. This is my story of fighting cancer and then taking care of my mom as she fought cancer. I published it on Amazon along with my other two books, Trading Quotes and Trading Wisdom. But this book is free. I'm doing the whole thing on YouTube at Cheds Trading. I'm on Twitter at Big Cheds. So last chapter was New Year's, same shit, and now we are at the chemotherapy has stopped working. We're getting into a really tough part in the book, but I'm going to push through and get it done. So thank you for being here. The chemotherapy has stopped working. I went to bed early. I went to bed extra early the following evening. That way I could wake up fresh and be ready for a big day at the hospital. Once I arrived, I went straight up to the front desk and asked if Mom had already checked in, and she had. It was nice to walk around the hospital without the plastic hospital bracelet on, and for just a moment, I forgot that I would be wearing a bracelet myself later in the day for my appointment. As I turned the corner, I found Mom in the waiting area, filling out a patient survey, and I greeted her with a kiss on the cheek. Mom had to fill out this survey every 3 chemotherapy cycles, and that way they could gauge how she was handling the side effects of the chemo over time and better tailor the treatment for her disease. Once Mom completed the survey, she handed it in, and then we were led into an examination room to meet with her doctor. As we sat down, I looked at Mom, and we both acknowledged the gravity of the moment, without saying anything, knowing just how important those scan results were. Then, breaking the silence, I once again reminded Mom that the last scan had showed that she was making progress, and I assured her that this scan would do the same. The doctor walked in the room a few minutes later and started out by going over the blood test results, and she let us know that everything looked good in that regard. The test showed that Mom was recovering well from her last session. Then came the bad news. The doctor delivered a massive blow to our hopes, explaining that the scan showed that Mom's disease had progressed. It was spreading further through her lymph nodes. I was absolutely crushed. Having assured Mom so many times that the chemotherapy was working and that we were winning the fight against her cancer. The doctor went on to explain that studies have shown that cancers with MSI high or microsatellite instability do not respond well to chemotherapy. That being said, the doctor still had hoped that the chemotherapy would have worked for at least a few more months and candidly admitted that she was disappointed, but still was impressed with how well Mom was holding up. She noted that Mom seemed to have more energy than before and was living a relatively active life despite all the treatments. The bottom line, however, was that the chemotherapy had stopped working and we had to move on to the next option, immunotherapy. Excuse me. Pardon me. The doctor explained that Mom would be taking something called Keytruda, pembrolizumab, and gave us a basic explanation of how it works. She drew a picture of a cancer cell to show that there was a blocker on that cell that prevented the body's natural immune system from attacking it. And this medicine, this immunotherapy, would remove that blocker and allow her body to attack and kill those cancer cells. According to Wikipedia, pembrolizumab, trade name Keytruda, is a humanized antibody used in cancer immunotherapy. It is an Ig-G4 isotope antibody that blocks the protective mechanism of cancer cells and thereby allows the immune system to destroy them. It targets the programmed cell death, or PD-1 receptor of lymphocytes. The FDA initially approved it to treat metastatic melanoma, and then in 2017, the FDA approved it for any unresectable or metastatic solid tumor with certain genetic anomalies, such as mismatch repair deficiency, or microsatellite instability. Pardon me. Sorry, folks. This was the first time that the FDA approved a cancer drug based on tumor genetics rather than tissue type or tumor site. And therefore, pembrolizumab is so-called tissue agnostic drug. The doctor told us that immunotherapy is normally used as a last resort, but we had the ability to use it now due to her genetic disorder. And this was a little bit of good news. I asked the doctor if this new therapy, Keytruda, could actually cure mom's cancer. And with apologetic eyes, the doctor said that it could not. She did, however, say that it could keep mom alive for a long time. The doctor's answer did not satisfy me. I was looking for some type of panacea or solution where we could defeat this cancer for once and for all, and not just for a long time. The doctor declared that mom would not be going through chemotherapy that day as we had originally planned and would instead come back the following week to begin the immunotherapy. The immunotherapy would be every 3 weeks rather than every 2 weeks, the doctor explained. The doctor went over the side effects, including risk of inflammation to her organs. Mom seemed pleased to hear that she would be coming back every 3 weeks instead of 2. It was nice to see that she had found a silver lining in all this mess, as I was still looking for one myself. My appointment was scheduled about 3 hours later, and since mom was not going to have chemo that day, now her schedule was wide open, and she asked me if I wanted some company as I waited for my appointment. And I told her no, explaining that I wanted to walk around the hospital so I could try to clear my mind. I gave mom a big hug and kiss, and I told her that everything was going to be okay. And then I set off for my walk. My feelings were all over the map as I began to walk, but most of all, I was mad, scared, and confused. I was mad at the cancer, wondering how dare it attack my mother, and I found it so offensive that the cancer continued to grow even after the chemotherapy treatments that mom seemed to be handling so well. I was also mad at myself for having once again created false expectations for the scan results and for sharing those false expectations with mom, which had perhaps gotten her hopes up. And then lastly, I was confused. I thought we had everything figured out about her medical case, and then I learned that I actually had no clue what was really going on. Being mad was just a small part of my emotional melange, as I was also incredibly scared that her cancer would keep growing, that we would not be able to control it. I was also scared that my cancer might be coming back, considering that mom's had continued to grow even after receiving chemotherapy. I figured that if I had been that wrong about mom's cancer, then I might be wrong about my own cancer as well. Riddled with disappointment, I just wanted things to get easier for mom so she could heal up and move on with life. However, that really didn't seem possible, so I had to reframe everything with all this new information. Eventually, it was time for my appointment with my oncologist, and after they took my vital signs, they led me into a room to meet with the doctor. He asked me how I was feeling, and I told him that I was doing well, and he told me that my blood tests were good. And then we talked about the latest update on my mom's health, and you could tell he was visibly disturbed to hear that her cancer had progressed. I explained that she would be having Keytruda now, and he was pleased with that, noting that it is an effective medicine, as he put it. That gave me some confidence that mom might actually be okay. And after that, we got back to talking about my health and my weight. And it was pretty much about the same as it had been 3 months prior. To salve his worries, to make him feel better, I told him that at least I was no longer gaining weight and I had started an exercise routine that I expected would deliver dividends. We talked more about how much I had been drinking and what I had been eating, and he once again reminded me that we needed to be mindful of my heart health because of the chemotherapy. The doctor then explained that he wanted to do an EKG before my next visit so he could see how my heart was holding up, as it had been almost a year since the last one. He also wanted me to fast before my next appointment so they could test something called fasting blood sugar level. According to reference.com, a normal blood sugar level after fasting for 8 hours is 70 to 100 milligrams per DL, according to Medline Plus. A fasting blood sugar test is common in screening for diabetes. Fasting blood sugar levels are typically measured in the morning after a person has fasted overnight. This is just one of several tests that make up a complete diabetes screening procedure. Anyone with a BMI or body mass index above 25 and everyone over the age of 45 is advised to undergo this screening test at least every 3 years. So far, I had been scoring right at 100, but if that level was any higher, I would be heading towards pre-diabetes levels, and he wanted to be sure that we kept a close eye on that number. Curious as to why, I asked him if this was related to my cancer and the subsequent treatment, and with a big smile, he said no. He explained it was just a general health consideration he wanted to focus on. My medical oncologist had more or less taken on the role of my primary care doctor, and his goal was to keep me alive and healthy now that I had finished my treatment. Trying to plan for the future. I asked my oncologist about the chance of the lymphoma coming back now that I had made it 9 months without any issues. And the doctor explained that my cancer was an aggressive one. And so after 2 years, the risk of relapse flattens out to almost zero. More or less, if I could make it 2 years without the cancer coming back, then I should be in the clear. I was almost halfway there, and that made me feel great. I also asked the doctor what would some of the early signs be if my cancer was coming back, and specifically if I would notice a large growth as I had before. The oncologist explained that the cancer may come back without me noticing it right away. For example, if it grew inside an organ or somewhere inside my body other than a lymph node. That information made things a little bit more scary for me, since the cancer could, in theory, come back without me noticing it right away. Nonetheless, I was still pretty happy I'd made it this far without a relapse. After absorbing all the information he had given me, I scheduled a follow-up appointment, and before I left, to head home. There was so much that I needed to think about. I was frankly overwhelmed with emotions, and those emotions were preventing me from seeing things clearly or really knowing what to do next. It was a miserable car ride home, as the joy had been completely sucked out of my body. I was left feeling dejected about Mom's health, and I was worried that she was not going to pull through. That night, I gave her a call to touch base and to see how she was feeling. Knowing that as sad as I was, Mom was sure to be feeling worse, and I wanted to comfort her. She told me that she was doing her best not to think about the worst possible outcome, and instead, she was focused on staying positive and hoping for the best. And she told me that it was too difficult to think about what would happen if the cancer continued to grow. And I completely understood that. We recounted everything that Mom's doctor had told us, and I reminded her of some of the good points, such as that she handled the chemotherapy well and that her energy level and weight had stabilized. I also told Mom that I thought she would have some time now to recover from the neuropathy and fatigue induced by her chemotherapy. She reminded me that the doctor told her that it would take up to a full year for that neuropathy to go away, and I believed that statement meant that the doctor was saying she would be alive in a year and maybe we would have some time to figure this whole mess out. Then Mom commented that there was still so much unknown about her medical situation. We didn't know what was going on with her lungs. And the doctor had mentioned that there might be some type of a growth or inflammation or maybe even pneumonia and was going to give Mom antibiotics to treat it. And Mom told me that she was feeling just fine and doubted that it was pneumonia due to the fact that she had a strong lung capacity. But of course, she was willing to go along with the doctors as they attempted to treat whatever it was. Mom also remarked that she felt like she kept having surprises foisted upon her, and she just wanted things to return to a normal rhythm. And she was happy to have 3 weeks in between her treatments as opposed to 2, as it had been before. And then we discussed all the paradigm shifts that we had had to absorb so far in her medical journey, starting with when they first found her cancer, to when they found out that the cancer had spread, to ultimately now when we found out that the chemotherapy had stopped working. Mom just remarked just how scary it was not to know if this new treatment would work and how frustrating it was that we wouldn't even find out for 6 weeks until that next scan. There was not much I could say to calm her down and to make her feel better, as honestly, I was feeling rather lousy myself. So I just focused on the fact that immunotherapy was, quote unquote, a breakthrough treatment and had not been available until a year or two prior. We talked about how new methods of fighting cancer were coming out all the time and that now the doctors knew exactly what type of disease she had. Narrowing it down to a genetic disorder gave her a better chance to survive, and I felt that we just needed this new treatment to buy us some time, and so we left the conversation on that note. Another paradigm shift. That's going to be the next chapter, my battles with cancer. This is my story of fighting cancer and then trying to take care of my mother as she fought cancer, and so I write this story for anybody who's newly diagnosed or dealing with the disease or knows someone who has cancer. And I want it to be free for everyone. So I'm reading it here one chapter at a time. As you can see, there's no retakes. I'm just reading it through. It's just me talking to you. And, by the way, I'm Big Cheds on Twitter. I've got 2 other books, Trading Wisdom, Trading Quotes, also available on Amazon, Kindle, paperback, and audiobook, just like my battles with cancer. But I want this to get out to everybody. So that's why I'm here. And we're heading into a really tough part of the book. So I'm going to push through because this is a really important project for me. So thank you for listening, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.